Hello again. I was reading a book by Richard Dawkins, which I got from the library recently, and was astonished and not a little dismayed to read the following passage. This is a book called Science in the Soul, and it was published in 2017. I'm sure I don't need to tell people anything at all about Richard Dawkins. Lord knows he's famous enough. On page 27, he says, and I quote, "I'd find it hard to justify funding research on alleged correlations between race and IQ. I'm not one of those who thinks that intelligence is unmeasurable or that race is non-biological or a social construct, but what could possibly be the point of investigating alleged correlations between intelligence and race? Certainly no policy decision should ever be based on such research." What an extraordinary thing for anybody to say, let alone a famous scientist. What could be the point of investigating alleged correlations between intelligence and race? The man asking this fat-headed question is an evolutionary biologist. You might as well ask what point there would be in investigating correlations between eye colour and race, or sickle cell anemia and race, or perhaps cancer of the prostate and race. It is called science, and the fact that one of the world's most well-known evolutionary biologists should say that he sees no point in investigating such a thing is shocking to me. What about the statement that certainly no policy decision should ever be based on such research? Well, at the moment, and this is just one example, I can think of a dozen others off the top of my head without stretching my brain too much, many universities in both this country and the United States make huge and expensive efforts to get black students into their academic courses, medical schools and so on. Despite those students not having sufficiently good qualifications to gain admission on their own merit. Harvard does this, so does Oxford, so does Yale. I've done videos on this before. Such efforts are justified on the grounds that the black students are unable to gain the same qualifications as everybody else because of racism or poverty, and it is assumed that their average IQ is the same as that of people whose families are from China or Europe. Suppose this assumption were to be proved false. Would that not be grounds for a policy decision about such programs? Just to be clear, I am not saying that there are any differences in average IQ between people whose families come originally from China or India and those whose ancestry lies in Africa. I am talking about the idea that even researching this possibility would be pointless and unacceptable, which seems to me to be an extraordinary way for a scientist to think. Here is another example from Steve Jones, who is a geneticist at University College London. He's the author of many books on genetics. This one, The Language of Genes, was published in 1993 and won an award for the best science book of the year. On page 242, we read the following. Much of the work on inherited differences in intellect between races is contemptible, and most of the rest is wrong. Now, this really is strange. Can you imagine anybody saying much of the work on renewable energy is contemptible, or much of the work on nuclear physics is contemptible? Of course not. Yes, yet researching intellectual ability and trying to see how it could be connected to social class, income, nationality or ethnicity is just the same. It is scientific research. And what does Jones mean by most of the rest is wrong? Is he saying that the work which he finds contemptible is actually right and reliable? A little bit vague there, I fancy. The evidence about varying levels of cognitive ability between ethnic groups is contradictory, and nobody knows if there even is any difference or correlation. If there were to be found something in the idea, then the implications would be huge and might affect how we approach things such as poverty, both in the developing world and also in our own cities. I can see no possible reason for not pursuing such an idea and trying to establish once and for all if there's anything in it. Claiming that it is contemptible and wrong for people even to ask the question, as Richard Dawkins and Steve Jones both do, shows them to be opposed to science itself, which is particularly surprising in the case of Richard Dawkins, who is always portrayed as a great rationalist and believer in the scientific method. And you'll see that the subtitle to his book here is Selected Writings of a Passionate Rationalist. And yet there's one subject that he doesn't want anybody to be rational about.